Let's begin this conversation as we enter this, campaign year. How would you describe the current? You've already started that whole pace setting. But how would you describe Nigeria's current political temperature, and how do we ensure that we pave a path for peace, even as the nation's, political future will be taking central stage of many discussions this year?
I think that one of the cardinal things, that everyone must learn, particularly the political elites, is the fact that the Nigerian state remains the Nigerian state. Government or administrations will always come and go, but the Nigerian state, which constitutes the people, including the government, including our territories and our sovereignty, must remain. And I think that that should be at the heart of every political player in the country, to understand that first and foremost, we need our country to be stable, to be peaceful, to be united, for us to build a very viral economy and all that. I think that in the last 2 years over, we've been running a system in terms of doing very drastic reforms in the economic space. Because first, you need your economy to be in shape, first and foremost, for you to maintain some bit of peace, unity, and stability in your nation state. The current administration have taken very, very bold steps, audacious steps. First, in the removal of the petroleum subsidy, which was a big drain and leakage on our economy. The other one also, the fluctuation of the foreign exchange. Those were the two major cardinal things that were dragging this nation back for over 20 years and thereabout. So what we are saying is the pain, there is nothing you do actually that you won't have the pain and the gain. The initial pain which Nigerians have suffered, you can see a bit of stability in terms of fiscal monetary stability already been established, within the country. Because what I'm speaking this is that you need the economy, to be very, very strong, vibrant, and durable and sustainable for you to be able to build an enduring peace in any society. So what I can appeal is still for the political class who make a capital of every statement and every policies of government without providing alternatives, on what it should be or what should be like, but rather than castigating and pulling down. In Nigerian political space, there is this pull-down syndrome. Once you are not there, you pull whoever is down there, to look very unpopular, to create a bit of distrust between the government and the people and the citizens. And I think that that is where the problem is. And that is why non-state violent actors have taken advantage of over the years, to continue to create division, within our systems. As we speak, while we had our Christmas and New Year holidays, there were men and women in the front line, in all the theaters of conflict, sacrificing their lives, for the nation. That is the element of state that I talk about. And these elements are actually beyond party lines. These are state assets, that are actually making sure that the country stabilizes. So I think the major problem is on the area of the politics, the kind of politics we play, particularly the political class, and why they need to understand that we need nation first, Nigeria first, before whatever political party interest and all that comes to be. So once that understanding is there, on the side of the political class and the political elite, they can now begin to support aspects of government, that speaks to the concerns of the people. Because it's all about consolidating the Nigerian nation state, making Nigeria stronger internally and also stronger externally. And I think that this is some of the things that we need to do, and I want to appeal to the Nigerian political class to please avoid this politics of pull down, avoid this politics of divisiveness, which has become very prevalent in our space, and try to increase state and citizens' relationship, to build trust and confidence. And I think that this government have done quite a lot in terms of sense of inclusion. If you look at the youth, if you look at the youth sector,
that might be relative, though.
No, if you look at the youth sector, for example, everything has to be incremental. I don't think that this administration come in place and promise a revolutionary change. No, it has to be an incremental reform on a system, that has suffered years of decay. If you don't do incremental reform, the next option you have is a revolution. So we need to incrementally reform our system, our economy, our politics, and the way we do. Already we have a tax reform system that everybody is a bit apprehensive of. But the point again is that you give government a benefit of the doubt, and once there are gaps within certain things, you go back to the to the amendment process. I think that the government is sensitive to listen to the yearnings and aspirations of the Nigerian citizens. And that is why at times you can see certain decisions are taken, there is a rollback, to look at it, because there are certain things people have observed and mentioned it, and then the government look at it and see that this is what it is. But we need to try, because the point is that we cannot remain where we are before again. We need to move forward. And
Definitely.
Moving forward is part of this reform, system that we are saying. I think that there are a lot of things that are happening that people are not taking advantage of, and I think that that is sad. People need to take very good advantage of. For example, there is an upcoming initiative called the World Development Initiative. What that means is that Nigeria has 778 local government, 774 local government areas, and as well as over 8,000 wards, political wards.
Yeah.
So what the president is doing with that initiative is taking development down into those ward areas. So it's a complete decentralization of the development system within Nigeria. You take it down to the ward. So it's not only just local government now. So if you have about 10 wards in the local government, all those 10 wards are experiencing government interventions and all that, irrespective of state or local government intervention. And I hope that these are the kind of initiatives that we need to support and upscale, including also the government going to the Supreme Court, to get a judgment for the autonomy of the local government areas. So if we find all those things beginning to work, we begin to reduce rural-urban migration, you begin to see that development takes place in certain places, increasing development, modernization, and then the presence of state also in those places that are functional, education, health, and all those things to begin to function. What we are suffering actually is a pressure, on our social economic system, particularly in the urban areas, why the population pressure is so heavy. And there is a mass movement of people, from rural areas to urban areas, further putting pressure on the enormous, on the little infrastructures, that are existing. So there is a competition for usage. So we need to decentralize, which is what is happening, very maximal decentralization. Another component that I think I need to mention is also these regional development commissions that have been set up. The South-South Development Commission, North Central Development Commission, North-East Development Commission. We need to activate those things, because those are very grand initiatives. And I think that we must applaud initiatives when we see very grand initiatives. And then what we can do as citizens, is to see how we support those initiatives to function. And then also hold the process to be accountable and are transparent in the delivery, of what the government have
whatever
promised.
The mandate or the setup was.
Exactly. So for me, if you've asked me, I would have expected political oppositions, to critically look at some of these policies, provide fault lines or gaps around those policies, and then perhaps see how government can address some of those gaps. That is what political opposition is.
Yeah, it's good that you've taken that direction. Let's come back again to polity. We've been talking about issue-based policy. Why does it seem like issue-based campaigns have struggled to take root? And where do we take it from here? How can we get parties to discuss, very important things that affect the nation beyond trading insults and all that?
I think that there is so much of intellectual laziness and research laziness on the part of most Nigerian political class. You need to invest on policy-making processes. That is why when you see the tax reform, for example, I'll use the example of the tax reform because it's a process that I've followed. The very depth process in terms of consultation, in terms of research, in terms of engagement, in different parts of the country and different stakeholders around across the Nigerian economy, that particular committee went into. To come up with a tax reform system. Most people didn't take time to actually read the content, and what they see is just a flyby in online.
But could it also be that in bringing out what the content was, it sometimes gets too voluminous, and people don't have all that time to get into that research?
I think that if you look at the tax reform, for example, there are bits, of those things, that were brought out for people to read and study. But you see, once there is a mischief, I'm sorry to say it, political mischief, anything Sones do is not correct. In workplaces too, we see that kind of competitions in certain places and all that, So whether Sones is doing very well or whatever, no, he's not doing very well. Whatever it is that he does, it doesn't do. So we see all that through at the governance space, where whatever government tries to do, it is never correct because people already form their biases and all that. And it's not good for the development and the peace of any nation states because what you sow today, you're going to reap it tomorrow. So I think that it is time that we begin to believe in our systems and then help our systems to work. Because when we continue this acrimony, divisiveness, we allow violent, we'll make our society, our country, a fertile ground, for insurgency and violence and banditry and the kind of things that we see. We'll make our very lovely Nigerian nation state, the centerpiece of Sahel and global terrorists to begin to come in and all that because of our kind of mindset and the way and manner we support the government. If I'm supporting Nigerian government, for example, I'm not supporting an individual. I'm supporting the entire apparatuses and the institutions of the Nigerian state.
How do we remove the individual from the state itself? How do people become patriotic enough to understand the division, the divide between the person who's president and the nation itself as the government, like the government and governance framework?
It takes enlightened citizenship. It takes enlightenment for me to have a broad understanding that I don't need to be biased towards you, either because we are not of the same religion or we are not from the same place. So it's that kind of, it's still that kind of petty-mindedness of individuals, and which I call the anti-enlightened, because if you're enlightened, you know that there is a broader interest, of Nigeria, that it is not because this particular person is in power, I must support, or this person is not in power, I must make sure that I bring the person down, because of election.
So there has to be a balance.
So there has to be a balance for you to understand. That is why I said research is very important. You need to first and foremost research the policies of this government. And I can tell you, for example, the two major policies which the government ran with, to ensure that they begin to recalibrate Nigerian economy, which has to do with the removal of oil subsidy and the foreign exchange.
I mean, the first one is still bikes, and people can always say, "Hey."
The point is that we've not seen alternative, even by
nobody has come up with an alternative,
even by opposing political class. So what we would have expected, is to say, okay, no, fine, you remove subsidy. Let's begin to see the level of investments, in certain areas. And that is why we must not only hold the federal government, because Nigeria is a federation of the federal government, the state government, and the local government. And also, thank God for Mr. President's own initiative. He's going down the line to create what we call the World Development Program.
Like you've stated earlier.
Like I stated earlier, which is a very, I can call it, if it works, it's a revolutionary arrangement, and I can understand where he's picking that up. He's picking that from his Lagos template, where there was local government, but he still went ahead to set up the local government development areas, which helped Lagos State to decentralize development, diffuse power, give people a sense of inclusion, and all that. So if that works, then we'll begin to see some drastic change. But sadly, the Nigerian political class, like I mentioned before, have always continued to either denounce, denigrate, whatever policy that comes out. When the Attorney General of the Federation, under the directive of Mr. President, went to the Supreme Court to secure judgment, for local government autonomy, a lot of people started saying, no, he wants to use the local government, not the state structures for election. So the politicization of air, everything we do in this country here, people politicize it. So even development, governance, everything is politicized. And that thing is a drag on the system. At times, the person who is at the center of this kind of reform, trying to build a modern state, and then you politicize this thing, you begin to overwhelm him.